Bertha Holloway was the worst kind of Karen. An entitled, wealthy, overweight white woman who thought the world revolved around her. If something bothered her, the entire neighborhood had to suffer. And the thing Bertha hated the most, dogs, especially big, loud ones. Unfortunately for her, her new neighbor owned a massive, highly trained dog. Kairos Kai Valdez, a decorated military officer, recently back from deployment, didn't have much in life. But he had Rec, a loyal Belgian Malinois who had saved his life countless times on the battlefield. To Kai, Rex wasn't just a pet, he was family, a fellow soldier, a guardian who had fought beside him through fire and blood. But to Bertha, Rex was nothing more than an annoying nuisance that needed to go. Using every dirty trick in the book, Bertha declared war on Kai and Rex. She filed false reports claiming the dog was dangerous, threw trash into Kai's yard, and even poisoned Rex's food. Kai tried to stay calm. He had faced worse enemies in the military, and he wasn't about to waste his energy on a petty Karen. But when Bertha seriously harmed Rex, she made the biggest mistake of her life. Because Kai wasn't alone, he had his brothers in arms. And when his fellow soldiers found out that a white Karen had dared to harm a military dog, they weren't going to let it slide. The military's wrath was about to rain down on Bertha Holloway in the most brutal way imaginable. Do you believe in karma? Never mess with a soldier. And never harm a loyal dog. What do you think Karen deserves for her actions? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. We bring you thrilling stories of justice, karma, and satisfying revenge. Follow us so you don't miss the next one. A soldier, a dog, and a new home. The setting sun bathed the quiet suburban neighborhood in hues of deep orange and gold. The air was crisp, carrying the distant scent of freshly cut grass and barbecues from neighboring yards. Birds chirped from treetops, and the faint laughter of children echoed from a few houses down the street. For most, this was just another peaceful evening in an upscale residential community. For Kairos, Kai Valdez, it was the beginning of a new life. After 15 years in the military, including multiple deployments in combat zones, Kai was finally settling down. No more barracks, no more sandstorms, no more gunfire ringing in his ears every night. Just a modest house with a fenced yard where he could finally enjoy some peace with his only true companion. Rex, the Belgian Malinois, sat at his feet, ears perked up, alert yet relaxed. Rex wasn't just a pet, he was a war hero, a partner who had saved Kai's life more times than he could count. They had faced bullets, explosions, and enemies together. This house wasn't just a place to live, it was a sanctuary, a place where they could finally rest, or so Kai thought, because peace, it wasn't going to last long. And the reason for that was standing on the other side of the fence, arms crossed, a deep scowl twisting her face into something monstrous. Her name was Bertha Holloway, and she was about to become the biggest nightmare of Kai's life. Meet the ultimate. Karen. Bertha Holloway was the definition of an entitled Karen, a 50-year-old, overweight, white, suburban woman. She had lived in the neighborhood for years and acted like she owned the entire street. Everyone knew her, and everyone hated her. But no one dared to cross her. She had a reputation for making people's lives miserable. Neighbors' music too loud. Call the police. Kids riding their bikes too close to her driveway. Scream at them until they cry. Someone parks too far over the line. Fake a ticket and stick it on their windshield. She was the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood, and what she said was law. But the one thing Bertha absolutely despised, more than anything, dogs. So when she saw her new neighbor moving in with a massive, muscular Malinois, she lost her mind. She stormed out of her house, stomping across her perfectly trimmed lawn, and jabbed a chubby finger over the fence. "Hey, you there," Kasai, who had just finished unloading a few boxes from his truck, turned around. Bertha's bloodshot eyes were fixed on Rex, who was lying down, tail wagging lazily. "That thing can't be here." Kai blinked, confused. "I'm sorry. That dog? This is a respectable neighborhood. We don't allow dangerous animals like that here." Kai stared at her for a moment, then chuckled softly. "Rex isn't dangerous. He's a trained military service dog. He's better behaved than most people. I don't care what he is." Bertha shrieked. "I don't want him in a neighborhood. He barks, he sheds, and he's going to attack someone. I'll be reporting this to the homeowners association and the police." Kai exhaled slowly. He had faced terrorists, insurgents, and life or death combat scenarios. A loud-mouthed suburban Karen, not even in the top 10 worst things he'd dealt with. "You do what you have to do, ma'am," he said simply, giving her a polite nod before turning back to his house. But if he thought that was the end of it, he was dead wrong. The start of a war. From that moment on, Bertha made it her mission to get rid of Rex. Her first attack, filing false complaints, she called animal control. Claiming there was an aggressive attack dog in the neighborhood, she sent letters to the homeowners association, demanding they force Kai to remove Rex. She called the police at least 3 times a week, reporting excessive barking, even though Rex barely made a sound. When that didn't work, she escalated. She started throwing trash into Kai's yard. Plastic bags, old newspapers, even rotten food. She installed an ultrasonic dog repeller on her porch, a device that emitted a painful high-frequency sound only dogs could hear. She began spreading rumors around the neighborhood that Kai was an unstable, PTSD-ridden ex-soldier who couldn't be trusted. But Kai didn't react. He refused to be baited. He had fought in wars. He had stared death in the face. He wasn't about to lose his temper over a miserable, pathetic woman like Bertha Holloway. But then she went too far. Crossing the line. It was a peaceful morning when Kai stepped outside to feed Rex, only to find his loyal companion lying motionless on the ground. His heart stopped. "Rex." He rushed over, shaking him gently. Rex barely moved, his breathing shallow, his tongue hanging out. Kai's stomach twisted in horror. Then he saw it, a half-eaten pile of ground beef sitting in the corner of his yard. His blood ran cold. It was laced with rat poison. Someone had tried to kill Rex, and he knew exactly who was responsible. Kai didn't panic. He scooped Rex up in his arms, threw open his truck door, and sped to the vet. Hours later, after emergency treatment, the veterinarian confirmed his worst fear. He was poisoned. If you had waited any longer, he wouldn't have made it. Kai felt a cold, deadly calm settle over him. This wasn't just an annoying Karen anymore. This was war. And if Bertha Holloway wanted a war, she was about to find out what happens when you mess with a soldier. A call for reinforcements. The engine of Kai's truck rumbled as he pulled into his driveway, his grip on the steering wheel white-knuckled with rage. Rex lay on the back seat, still weak, but stable. The vet had assured him the dog would recover. But that didn't erase the unforgivable crime Bertha had committed. This was no longer about neighborhood disputes. This was about life and death. Kai exited the truck, exhaling slowly. His mind was razor-sharp, calculating. He had learned a long time ago that revenge wasn't about acting in anger. It was about strategy, and he was about to unleash something Bertha had never seen before. Pulling out his phone, he scrolled to a contact labeled Brotherhood. Kai, I need you guys. Now. Within seconds, responses flooded in. Darius Dare Johnson, say no more. ETA 3 hours. Miguel Ghost. Ramirez, bringing my laptop. Let's see what this bitch is hiding. Ethan Grizzly Turner, need me to break something. Samantha. Sam Lee. Ooh, I love psychological warfare. I'm in. Kai allowed himself a small smirk. War had just been declared, and he wasn't fighting alone. Bertha's victory, or so she thought. Meanwhile, Bertha Holloway sat in her overpriced living room, sipping a glass of wine, smug as ever. She had done it. That damn dog was out of the picture. With any luck, it would die soon, and she wouldn't have to deal with it or its owner ever again. Bertha leaned back, feeling invincible. For years, she had gotten her way. She had bullied her neighbors. She had manipulated the system. She had never faced any real consequences. What could Kai do? Call the police. She had connections. She had money. She always won. But Bertha had underestimated something crucial. Kai wasn't just any man. He was a soldier. And soldiers never let an attack go unanswered. The first strike. By the time Bertha woke up the next morning, things were already set in motion. 1, her car wouldn't start. It had worked fine yesterday, but today, completely dead. The mechanics couldn't figure out why. 2, her security cameras mysteriously malfunctioned. The footage, gone. Not a single recording from the past 48 hours. 3, her mailbox flooded with anonymous letters. Each one contained a single message. We know what you did. Bertha's smugness began to crack. She tried to brush it off, but then the phone calls started. Her number had somehow been leaked onto shady websites. By noon, she had received over 200 spam calls, text messages from strangers calling her a monster, a voicemail that simply whispered, "Justice is coming." Bertha wasn't laughing anymore. She was being hunted. Psychological warfare. By the time night fell, Bertha was a nervous wreck. The power in her house flickered. The streetlights outside blinked on and off. A dark SUV idled just outside her home for hours, never moving. Bertha called the police, but they found nothing. "Ma'am, are you sure you're not imagining things?" the officer asked. Bertha screamed at them, demanding they do something. But deep down, she knew something was coming, and she couldn't stop it. Crossing the final line, desperate to regain control, Bertha went on the offensive. 1, she called her lawyer, demanding legal action against Kai. The response, "Sorry, you don't have a case." 2, She spread even more lies about Kai, saying he was dangerous and unstable. 3. She even tried to break into his yard in the dead of night, probably to plant more evidence against Rex. But she didn't realize Kai was waiting. Bam! The moment Bertha stepped foot onto his property, a powerful floodlight blasted on, exposing her like a criminal caught in the act. From the shadows, Kai and his team stepped forward. Dare, Ghost, Grizzly, Sam, each of them stood like executioners, staring Bertha down. The hunt was over. It was time for her punishment. The ambush. Click. The unmistakable sound of a gun being cocked echoed through the night. Bertha froze in place on Kai's lawn, her plump fingers tightening around the gate she had just unlatched. She was caught. She turned her head slowly, sweat trickling down her forehead, and saw them. 4 figures stood before her, illuminated by the blinding floodlight. Darius, Dare Johnson, arms crossed, his massive frame unmoving. Ethan Grizzly, Turner, cracking his knuckles, a twisted grin on his face. Miguel, Ghost, Ramirez, standing eerily still, a laptop bag slung over his shoulder. Samantha, Sam Lee, her smirk sharp as a knife. And in the center of them all, Kai. His stare was ice cold, his muscles tense, his entire being radiating the kind of energy that told Bertha she had made the biggest mistake of her life. Sesk. Sam clicked her tongue, breaking and entering. That's a felony, sweetheart. You can't prove I was doing anything illegal, Bertha stammered. This is harassment. I'll call the police. Kai took a slow step forward. Oh, we won't stop you. Bertha, his voice was deathly calm. In fact, go ahead, call the cops. Let's see how that plays out. Bertha hesitated. She knew they had something on her. They had everything. The tipping point. Kai nodded at Ghost, who pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. Ping, a nearby speaker, crackled to life. And suddenly, I want you to dig up everything on Kai Valdez. Every mistake he's made, every classified file. I need dirt on him. I don't care if it's illegal. Just get me something I can use. Bertha's own voice echoed through the night. Her face turned ghostly pale. How did you? Ghost smirked. You really think you can hire someone to steal military records? And we wouldn't find out? Silence. Bertha felt her entire world crumbling around her. The police won't help you now, Dare murmured. You went too far. She had lost. Everything was over, or so they thought. Because in that moment, Bertha pulled her trump card. The counterattack. The next morning, the police knocked on Kai's door. Mr. Valdez, we have a warrant for your arrest. Kai's world flipped upside down. What the hell for? For assault, harassment, and property damage. You are being accused of threatening a civilian and conducting an illegal surveillance operation. Kai's jaw clenched. Bertha had filed a lawsuit against him. She had manipulated the system one last time. Across the street, Bertha stood on her porch, smiling smugly. She had just turned the tables. The courtroom trap. A week later, Kai stood in a packed courtroom, wearing a suit instead of his usual military gear. Bertha had dragged him into a legal battle, and it was looking bad. Her lawyer painted Kai as a violent and aggressive ex-military man with PTSD, claiming he had been harassing a helpless woman in her own neighborhood. The judge was listening. The jury was shifting in their seats. For the first time, it seemed like Bertha might actually win. But then she made her fatal mistake. The fatal mistake. During her testimony, Bertha got too cocky, too confident. She let something slip. "I've been keeping records on Mr. Valdez for months," she declared proudly. "I knew I'd catch him slipping eventually." The courtroom went silent. The prosecutor perked up. "You kept records, Mrs. Holloway." Bertha blinked. Yes, I needed proof." The prosecutor smiled. "And how exactly did you obtain this information?" Realization dawned in Bertha's eyes. She had just admitted to illegal surveillance in front of a judge. Her lawyer tried to intervene, but it was too late. Objection. Overruled. "Mrs. Holloway, did you or did you not violate privacy laws to collect information on Mr. Valdez?" Checkmate. The collapse. The case flipped on its head. Bertha was now the criminal. A federal investigation was launched into her illegal data collection and conspiracy to falsify evidence. Within 24 hours, the court dropped all charges against Kai. Within 48 hours, Bertha Holloway was arrested. As she was dragged away in handcuffs, she screamed, "No, you can't do this. I'm the victim." But the world no longer believed her lies. The Karen had fallen, and there was no getting back up. The Karen that wouldn't die. For most people, getting arrested would be the end of the line. But Bertha Holloway wasn't most people. Even after being charged with illegal surveillance, falsifying evidence, and harassment, she somehow managed to make bail. Her rich connections and remaining assets kept her out of prison. Temporarily, but she wasn't done fighting. Not yet. Bertha still had one last move to play. And this time, she wasn't going to rely on the law. A hit job. Kai had just started to settle back into his normal life. Rex, now fully recovered, lay beside him on the porch as he sipped his morning coffee. Peace. But peace never lasts long. As Kai checked his phone, an alert popped up. Breaking news. Judge presiding over Holloway. Case steps down due to threats. Kai's eyes narrowed. Bertha was doing something behind the scenes, and he needed to find out what. The trap. That night, as Kai walked Rex near his house, he felt it. Someone was watching him. His instincts, honed from years in war zones, screamed at him. Crack. A twig snapped behind him. In a split second, Kai turned, just in time to see two men in dark hoodies charging toward him. An ambush. But they had made a critical error. They attacked a soldier. The soldier fights. Back. Wham! Kai ducked under the first attacker's swing and slammed his fist into the guy's ribs. A sickening crunch. The second man lunged. But Rex was faster. The Malinois leaped, his teeth sinking into the attacker's forearm. Screams. The man collapsed, writhing, as Rex dragged him to the ground. It was over in seconds. Kai knelt down, gripping the first man's collar. "Who sent you?" The thug wheezed, clutching his ribs. "Screw you," Kai sighed, then grabbed the man's pinky finger and snapped it backwards. Crack! A shriek of pain. "Try again." The thug trembled. It was the lady, the one from the news, Bertha. She had hired men to take Kai out. She had just made her final mistake. The military's wrath. The next day, Bertha Holloway woke up to hell itself. Her bank accounts frozen, her remaining assets seized, her house surrounded by men in uniform. Kai and his team had done their homework. Ghost hacked her financial records. Every shady deal, every underhanded transaction, all handed over to the authorities. Dare had called in favors. Bertha's attempts at bribing officials were now under federal investigation. Sam ensured every detail of her crimes was broadcast nationwide. Bertha was finished, but they weren't done yet. The final beating. As night fell, Bertha tried to run. She packed a suitcase, stuffed stolen cash into a duffel bag, and bolted for the back door. Bam! She ran straight into Kai. He grabbed her by the throat, slamming her against the wall. No more legal tricks. No more lawyers. Just punishment. You think you can hire people to kill me? Kai hissed. Bertha choked, her face turning red. I didn't mean... Wham! Kai's fist smashed into her gut. Wham! A second punch. This time to the ribs. Bertha crumpled to the floor. Wheezing, she tried to crawl away, but a boot stomped down on her hand, pinning her. It was Dare. You hurt one of our own. His voice was ice. Did you really think we wouldn't come for you? Bertha sobbed. Broken, she had thought money and power would protect her. She had been wrong. Don't kill me, she screamed. Kai knelt down, grabbing her jaw, forcing her to look him in the eyes. Oh, Bertha. His next words made her blood run cold. I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to let you live, so you can suffer. The broken Karen, Bertha Holloway, lay sprawled on the cold, wet pavement, gasping for air. Her ribs throbbed from Kai's punches. Her fingers ached from Dare's boot, crushing them. Her entire body trembled, drenched in sweat and fear. She had never been this powerless before. She was the one who bullied others. She was the one who controlled people. But now she was nothing. Through swollen eyes, she saw Kai and his team standing over her, silent, unmoving, like executioners, watching their victim take their last breath. And worst of all, they weren't even angry anymore. They were just done with her. Kai squatted down, staring into her bloodshot eyes. Look at yourself, Bertha. His voice was calm, almost pitying. This is what happens when you pick a fight with the wrong people. Bertha whimpered. She wanted to scream, to threaten, to do anything to regain control. But she couldn't. She had no power left. Losing everything. The next morning, Bertha woke up in her own bed, every inch of her body sore. For a brief moment, she thought maybe it had all been a nightmare. But then she checked her phone. Her bank accounts were still frozen. Her assets were still seized. The police had reopened every case she had ever been involved in. There was no escape. She had lost everything. Her wealth, her influence, her status. When she walked outside, expecting at least some sympathy from her neighbors, she was met with disgusted stares. The entire neighborhood had turned against her. She wasn't feared anymore. She was hated. Public humiliation. The worst part. She had become a national joke. Breaking news. Karen of the Year. Bertha Holloway faces criminal charges. How one woman went from rich housewife to public enemy. 1. Military veterans serve karma to animal abuser. Her face was everywhere. Her crimes were known to millions. And no one felt bad for her. She tried to go grocery shopping, but was met with boos and insults. Monster, you deserve worse. How does it feel to lose? Bitch. Bertha ran back to her car, tears streaking down her face. The whole world had turned against her. She was utterly alone. The final blow. A week later, Bertha received a letter. She opened it with shaking hands and saw the words that shattered what little was left of her soul. Notice of eviction. She was losing her house, her final piece of security. Gone. She sank to the floor, sobbing hysterically. Nowhere to go. No one left to help her. No power, no money, no control. She had finally hit rock bottom. Meanwhile, on the other side, at that exact moment, miles away, Kai sat on his porch, a cold beer in one hand. Rex curled up at his feet. Peace, true peace. Dare sat beside him, chuckling as he read the latest news. She lost her house. Ghost smirked, checking his phone. They won't even let her into a homeless shelter. Nobody wants her. Sam stretched her arms, grinning. Perfect karma. The world finally got tired of her bullshit. Kai took a sip of his beer, staring at the sky. He had won. And Bertha, she was finished. Forever. The last day of Bertha Holloway. The rain pounded against the pavement, washing away the last remnants of Bertha Holloway's former life. She stood outside a run-down motel, gripping a single trash bag filled with what little she had left. No mansion, no money, no power, just a fat, broken woman standing in the cold, completely alone. She had tried begging for help, calling every friend she used to have. No one answered. No one cared. Her hands trembled as she reached into her pocket, pulling out a crumpled $10 bill. One of the last pieces of her once massive fortune. The motel clerk barely looked at her as he took the money, tossing her a rusty key. Room 9. That was it. No sympathy, no kindness, just like how she had treated others. Karma's final judgment. That night, Bertha sat alone in her filthy motel room, staring at her reflection in the cracked mirror. She was unrecognizable. Her once perfect hair was greasy and unkempt. Her once expensive clothes were now cheap, wrinkled, and stained. Her once powerful voice had been reduced to nothing but whimpers and gasps for breath. She used to control everything. Now she controlled nothing. For the first time in her life, she felt true fear. Not fear of others, not fear of losing money, but fear of her own emptiness. She had destroyed everything. And for what? As she curled up on the motel bed, staring at the ceiling, one final realization sank in. She deserved this, every last bit of it. Meanwhile, in a different world, while Bertha rotted in her own misery, Kai and his team gathered for a small backyard barbecue. The air was filled with the scent of grilled meat, the sound of ice clinking in glasses, and the rare, priceless feeling of peace. No more threats, no more stress, just good food, good friends, and freedom. Kai sat in his chair, Rex resting his head on his lap, his tail wagging lazily. Sam clinked her beer against Dare's, smirking. So, should we feel bad for her? Dare scoffed. Not a damn bit. Ghost chuckled, shaking his head. She was the kind of evil that thought she was untouchable. People like that don't get sympathy. Kai didn't say anything. He simply stared into the fire pit, watching the flames dance in the night air. Then, with a small smirk. He finally spoke. Karma did all the work for us. We just made sure she saw it coming. The team laughed, raising their drinks. Justice had been served, and the world was better for it. The moral of the story: Bertha Holloway thought she could do whatever she wanted. She thought power, money, and lies would protect her. But in the end, she lost to the one force she could never escape: karma. And karma never loses. What do you think about this ending? Did Bertha deserve worse? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. We bring you thrilling justice stories where karma always wins. Don't miss the next one.